This zookeeper waited 5 years to reunite with the gorilla he raised. But when they met again, the gorilla had no idea who he was. Keep watching to find out why. In 2017, a viral video showed a zookeeper shedding tears of joy after being reunited with an endangered mountain gorilla that he had raised for 22 years. The heartwarming reunion took place at the Port Lympne Park in Kent, England. In the clip, the grown-up gorilla can be seen walking over to his former zookeeper, who is standing outside his enclosure with a bunch of other people. At first, the animal doesn't seem to recognize him, but then it suddenly does. The gorilla then starts beating his chest and screams at the top of his lungs. After that, the two embrace each other through the cage bars. The zookeeper caresses the gorilla's head as if they're old friends reuniting after a long time apart. And although this was an emotional moment for the zookeeper, the gorilla seemed very happy to see him too. So what's going on here? Why was the zookeeper crying? And where did the gorilla go after it left the zoo? Let's take a closer look. The man in the video is named Damien Aspinall, and he works at the Howlett's Wild Animal Park and the Port Lympne Reserve, both of which are located in Kent, England. Damien has worked at these parks since 1983, and he fell in love with gorillas almost immediately. Damien eventually became the primate specialist at the parks and spent his days looking after the animals. His main responsibility was to take care of the rare mountain gorillas. That's why he built a close relationship with one of them named Congo. Congo sadly passed away in 2015 after suffering from heart complications. But this meant that Damien had to travel to Rwanda to get another gorilla to take its place. When he arrived at the sanctuary in Rwanda, Damien was introduced to a baby gorilla that needed a new home. It had been rejected by its mother, and so Damien knew he had to step in and raise the baby gorilla himself. The new arrival was named Kwibi, and he came into Damien's life back in 1993. Kwibi was only 2 years old when he moved to England with Damien, and it wasn't long before the pair formed an incredibly strong bond. As you can imagine, Damien couldn't simply walk into the gorilla enclosure and pick up a wild animal without it putting up a fight. So instead, Damien spent months slowly building trust with Kwibi. Eventually, the young gorilla started warming up to his new owner and felt comfortable enough to accept food from him. This is actually the same method that gorilla mothers use to feed their babies. That's why it was ideal for Damien. After spending a few months together, Damien and Kwibi were ready to move on to the next stage. They would meet up at the edge of the enclosure, and Kwibi would climb onto Damien's knee. After this, they would venture into the forest for a bit, and Damien would practice walking like a gorilla. According to Damien, gorillas often imitate their favorite people. If the person is nice to them, the gorilla will copy their movements and sounds. So the fact that Kwibi was willing to walk on all fours around the park with Damien was a sign that the pair had a good relationship. Damien said that he didn't do anything special to build trust with Kwibi. He just gave him lots of affection and treats. He said, "I don't think there's any great mystery about it. He's a sentient being. You treat him well and he'll reciprocate. It's not hard." Throughout the years, Damien and Kwibi remained best friends. Whenever Damien went into the enclosure, Kwibi would always want to be near him. One time, Damien even entered the enclosure wearing a gorilla suit. Kwibi was curious about the strange man in the costume, but once it realized that it was his owner underneath, it quickly calmed down. Damien says that during those 22 years, he and Kwibi never had an argument. Even when Kwibi would occasionally bite him, it was never aggressive. Kwibi had accidentally bitten off part of Damien's finger once, but that was because he was still a baby and didn't know any better. Damien was slightly injured, but it was nothing serious. Sadly, though, Damien and Kwibi had to spend some time apart in 2015. As we mentioned earlier, Congo died in August of that year, which left a space in the enclosure that needed to be filled. Kwibi had spent most of his life with Congo, so he would need a new friend. Luckily, a young male gorilla named Jock also needed a new home, so it was decided that he would move in with Kwibi. The two hit it off right away and soon became best friends. Despite being separated from Kwibi, Damien still took good care of the gorilla. He visited him every day and would chat to him through the enclosure's intercom system. Damien said that his conversations with Kwibi were more like grunts and screams than actual words. But somehow they managed to communicate with each other. But after 22 years, it was time for Kwibi to move on. Just like Congo before him, Kwibi was getting old, and the enclosure that he and Jock shared was getting too small for them. This is why Damien made the difficult decision to send Kwibi to a larger enclosure in South Africa. Even though he was sad to say goodbye to his best friend, Damien felt that it was the right thing to do. Kwibi would now have the opportunity to live the rest of his life surrounded by nature and hopefully find a mate. However, before making the journey, Damien wanted to have one last conversation with Kwibi. He went into the enclosure and sat down next to his old friend. Kwibi climbed onto Damien's lap, and the two stayed like that for several hours. After saying their final goodbyes, Damien left the enclosure knowing that he may never see Kwibi again. 5 years had passed since Kwibi's departure, and Damien hadn't given up hope of seeing him one more time. Finally, he decided to return to South Africa and make the trip to the wildlife reserve where Kwibi was living. When he got there, Damien was led into a room with a glass window. On the other side of the window was a gorilla that looked very similar to Kwibi. Damien couldn't believe his eyes. It was really him. According to Damien, time had flown by and he hadn't realized how big Kwibi had gotten. Even though the gorilla had changed a lot, Damien felt an instant connection with him. Once Kwibi realized that Damien was there, he excitedly started beating his chest. Damien responded by doing his best imitation of a gorilla. After that, Kwibi climbed through the trees and headed straight for Damien. He wanted to get a closer look at his old owner. Even though they had been apart for many years, they still recognized each other. But Damien had no idea whether this was because of his scent or something else. When they finally got to see each other face to face, the two embraced through the bars of the enclosure. For a while, they just stood there hugging each other. Kwibi was gentle and careful not to hurt Damien with his strength. Then Damien started scratching the back of Kwibi's hand. This is the same way that female gorillas show affection to their babies. Somehow, the two were able to communicate with each other despite not speaking the same language. Even though the reunion was emotional for Damien, he tried to remain stoic for the sake of the visitors. But after they left, Damien broke down and cried. He was overcome with emotion after seeing his old friend again. Even though the reunion was only a short one, Damien says it was one of the best days of his life. It's not often that a man and a gorilla become such good friends that they recognize each other years later. These two were inseparable for many years, and they'll likely never forget each other. Now you need to watch what happens when a zookeeper tries to feed a gorilla. Or have a look at this heartwarming moment when a zookeeper reunites with an elephant she raised.